Good morning, this is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for August 16th, 2015. It's been a long time since I've done an update video, going all the way back to June 15th, so over 2 months. And the reason for that is it's been pretty quiet in the Atlantic Basin, and Hurricane City is an Atlantic Basin tracking website, so there hasn't been a lot out there. We've had a few tropical storms, a couple of them flirting with land, but nothing real significant so far this hurricane season. And the reason is the basin is pretty unfavorable out there right now, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Here is the graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. We have an Invest 96L south of the Cape Verde Islands in the eastern Atlantic, and the National Hurricane Center is giving us a 40 to 60% chance of development over the upcoming week. And a few of the models, which I'll get to in just a minute, are indicating we could have a tropical storm moving into the Caribbean potentially, so that's something residents there need to be aware of going into late next week and into next weekend. But I also want to talk a little bit about the El Nino conversation that's been going on over the past couple of months, and how we have a strengthening El Nino, and how does that compare to years past, and what can we expect in the Atlantic Basin this year because of El Nino. Let's go ahead and take a look at the current water vapor loop of the Atlantic Basin, courtesy of NOAA. The color enhanced loop shows several upper level lows northeast of the Bahamas, and we have a upper level low out in front of our developing 96L, and as a result we have a large swath of dry air trapped out here east of the Lesser Antilles. A pattern like this is referred to as a TUT, a tropical upper tropospheric trough. Try saying that 5 times in a row. But what this is a system that creates upper level lows in the Atlantic Basin, which causes wind shear and unfavorable conditions, which is fairly common for a El Nino type year. But a lot of unfavorable swirls out in the Atlantic Ocean right now, and this is why nothing can really get cranking right now unless it's in between one of these upper level lows with a little bit of a high pressure aloft to protect it from the shear and allow it to develop. So let's take a look at our current system out in the East Atlantic, and this is Invest 96L, and it looks pretty well organized out there. I was looking at the sea surface temperatures right around 80 degrees all the way across towards the Caribbean, so it's got warm enough sea surface temperatures to develop, but again, that dry sinking air out in front of it and the upper level lows may prevent this from becoming anything significant. This could potentially, where it's located right now for the next several days, have a chance to become a tropical storm, because it's not that hostile out where it is right now. But as it gets closer to the Caribbean, there's basically scissors out in front of this thing, and it's not really going to allow it to develop very much. But the system does need to be watched for development over the coming days, especially going into next weekend. So let's take a look at the European model going out to the 24th, and this indicates that we could see a potential for a tropical storm. The European model is pretty good, and we always talk back and forth about the GFS versus the Euro, which model is better. Well, let me show you the difference between the two models on this system. Here is the Euro going out to the 24th, and you can see that we have a developing system right here, just east of the northern Leeward Islands. And then as we go forward in time, the European model indicates that this will be there it is on the 26th, which is next Wednesday, not this coming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, a potential tropical storm right near the island of Cuba, Puerto Rico rather. And I'm distracted here because I'm trying to work with this screen pen, but you can see it right here near Puerto Rico, and the system should be a weak system, maybe a depression storm according to the European model, right near Puerto Rico. But now you ask, what is the GFS showing? Well, let's go to the GFS for the 24th, and you see there's maybe a little bit of a hint of something here right just east of the Lesser Antilles moving off to the west. And then if we go out to the 26th, you can see an indication that there may be a little bit of something trying to hang on here in the Northeast Caribbean Sea, but the GFS is less aggressive with this system and really doesn't have it doing much of anything, as probably an open wave moving into the northeast Caribbean Sea. We'll have to see which model plays out. Again, the battle between the GFS and the Euro, which will win this battle. And as I pointed out earlier, here is the dry air. Notice the aqua area is all sinking dry air, and it's been pretty stationary here because of these upper level lows I talked about earlier, northeast of the Bahamas, and they just continue to feed that dry air swath and keep it in place. So eventually this system is going to run into the dry air. How much of impact that's going to have on it remains to be seen, but it doesn't look good for anything ramping up in a big way heading into the Caribbean Sea. And then of course we also have the dry air out here coming off the coast of Africa. Now here is 96L just south of the swath of dry air down in here, and it's far enough south that it's really not dragging too much of the dry air into it, but as it moves west it'll escape a little bit of that dry air and have a little bit of an opportunity out here around 50 west to develop a little bit, and then as it gets closer to the Caribbean it's just going to run into a wall of shear and it's going to have a real hard time getting its act together. And then another factor is the above normal pressure readings in the Atlantic Basin. I know this map is really hard to see on your screen, but let me talk a little bit about the pressures in this area. Look out here. This is the Atlantic where I'm drawing. I'm hoping you can see this okay. The yellow area on the map are above normal pressures in the Atlantic Basin. That is not favorable for development. Now you look out in the Pacific and look at these way below normal, and that's why we're seeing a plethora of tropical storms and hurricanes, typhoons out here in the Pacific heading in that direction because the pressures are low enough to allow development in this area. But in the Atlantic it's pretty unfavorable with pressures above normal, and this is a map I always like to use to keep track of what the indications are for future development coming up. And it's again, pressures above normal not real bode well for any significant development in the Atlantic Basin. All right, let's talk a little bit about El Nino and what is going to happen this season, what has happened in the past. And this is an interesting graphic from the ENSO website from NOAA, and they go back in history and look at the temperature differentials going back in certain years. And everybody's liking to compare this year to 1997. We right at 1997 at this time of the year, the temperature was 1.0 for El Nino, and El Nino is really around 1.5 degrees for being classified as a legitimate El Nino. So 1997 at this time we were at 1.0, and look down here at this year, right now we're at 1.0, so we're matching 1997. And then later in the active part of the hurricane season in 1997 we were at 1.7, and then 2.0 and 2.2, right at the very sharp height of the hurricane season. It was September, October, November, when you see the most activity. It was 2.2 degrees above normal temperatures in the eastern Pacific where El Nino is brewing. So we can only extrapolate the numbers here and figure, well, if it's equal to those numbers, 1997 would be a similar year. But also in 1987, there was a similar setup as well. It didn't get quite as warm. It got up to 1.6 degrees, but it was a 1.0 at this point of the year back in 1987 as well. So let's go back and look at 87, and you can see that we had one significant storm, Emily, affect the Greater Antilles here, and it moved into Hispaniola and then recurved out into the Atlantic. And then we had Hurricane Floyd affect the Florida Keys and move northeast through Florida. And again, my high pick area this year is southwest Florida coast, so we'll see if we can get a system similar to Floyd maybe developing and moving off to the northeast in an El Nino type year. Let's look at 97. That's what everybody's comparing this El Nino to, is 1997. And you can see that Erica was the only significant storm that brushed the northeastern Antilles and then moved out into the open Atlantic. And then Hurricane Danny rather moved into Alabama, dumped a torrential amount of rain in that area, and it was a huge story with flooding. But that was the only effect on the United States that year in 1997. So will we have a similar year this year? We'll have to see. But right now it looks like it's going to be a slow season. The next named storm on the list is Dennis, and we are already moving into a pattern of, let me show you Hurricane City here, by the way. We have the invest up on the map. And Danny is the next named storm on the list, by the way, not Dennis. But the invest is showing up on the map, and we will see as the models progress which model ends up being the best performer. But all indications are the Antilles may be affected by this system as a weak system, maybe tropical storm, tropical depression. So we'll see about that. I'll be featuring the city or island that is believed to be at highest risk as this gets around 50 degrees west. We'll have a much better idea based on model projections where this system is going to go. Well, that's it for now. Keep an eye on this system if you're in the Caribbean. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City. And one more thing, follow me on Twitter at Hurricane City. Thank you.